Welcome to episode 17 of the Revolution podcast, where I, your host Ryan, sit down with industry experts to discuss the latest trends in e-mobility, clean tech, and the future of transportation. Today I'm joined by Peter Bracken, former professional rugby union player turned e-mobility advocate, who's aiming to set 2 world firsts in e-mobility. Into the episode we go. Thank you for joining the podcast, Peter. I tend to start each podcast by asking my guests to introduce themselves. I think in this case, as a former professional rugby player, your path to e-mobility is a unique one and really fascinating. So I'd love to know about your story.
Oh, brilliant. Great to be on the show, Ryan. Thank you for the invite. Rugby obviously was my main background. I played all sorts of sport growing up, and rugby became the main thing. Ended up playing professionally for 10 years and really enjoyed it. It was a great thing to do while I was young, and gone into the other things since, but absolutely fantastic career to have. You have your ups and downs or whatever, but it certainly builds you as a person, builds your commitment and your work ethic and your communication skills and all that kind of thing. So it was certainly good while it lasted.
Okay, great. And before we dive into the e-mobility stuff, I'd love to discuss your career as a rugby player, particularly because you're the first sports person I've welcomed on the podcast. I also think it's a big part of your story and probably influences your motivation and desire for your current passion in e-mobility. So this is a bit cliche, but was it always a dream to be a rugby player? And as a kid, when your teacher asked you what you wanted to be when you were older, did you say rugby player?
I actually did that. I remember since I was 6 years of age, gone down to the rugby club. I said, I'm going to play for Ireland. I'm going to, and I did, I pretty much did that. Ups and downs along the way, but I suppose it's either in you or not. And even growing up, I was always one of the better guys talent-wise on the team. But, in my local club, on my team, I might be in the top 5, but I was never the best player on the team. My local club was Tullamore Rugby Club. And, I might have been, I was definitely not the best player, even on the under 14s, under 16 stuff going up. But I was okay. I was decent, but I just wanted it more. And I worked harder. I did all the extra bits before anyone else was doing it, or anyone kind of my own peer group were doing it. And I suppose I made all the sacrifices to do that. I remember when I was 15, basically getting banned out of the local gym because I was too young, and people didn't know as much about sports science back then. And they said, "Oh, don't be doing those weights, it'll slow you down," which is the exact opposite. But so I used to sneak in. I remember climbing up, getting a ladder and climbing up in the small window, going down at 6 o'clock in the morning to do training and get out of there before the first person would come in. Did that for a couple of years until I got caught. Then I liberated a key out of nowhere and I was back in. So eventually I suddenly then turned 18 and said, well, they can't really stop me doing that now. But I'm glad I did. It was doing all those extra things and again worked my way up, and I started to make regional teams and national underage teams, and I said, I'm probably good enough to do this, and I definitely have the work ethic to do it, and I give it my best shot. But there's no guarantees. Lots of things can happen, injuries, all that kind of stuff, but it's worth giving a try. And since 6 years of age, I wanted to be a professional rugby player, even though back then rugby wasn't even professional. It was still an amateur game. But I knew somehow, some way, I'd end up making a living out of it. And I did that for a number of years.
Yeah, well, a common misconception in sports is that talent is everything. But hard work goes just as far, if not even further than talent. So for our listeners who are not familiar with rugby, I think it's easy to forget that just because you and I come from two of the biggest rugby nations in Ireland and England, not every country plays rugby. So a quick explanation for our listeners is that it is a full contact sport that originated in England in the 19th century. More than 6 million people play worldwide, making it the 9th most popular sport in the world. It is most popular in Commonwealth countries and has some striking similarities to American football. Ireland is one of the biggest and most successful rugby nations in the world. And with that being said, I wanted to ask about the experience as a youth player in Ireland, trying to make it professional, and how the system works.
I think it's very well-rounded, actually, Ryan. I think we have a very good system over here in Ireland. You're right, we're always, in and out the top 5. Before the last Rugby World Cup, we were number 1 in the world for, a couple of months. But generally, we're definitely always in the top 10. We had a decent Six Nations this year, which the main rugby competition between the Northern Hemisphere teams. And but in Ireland, yes, I suppose back in my day, rugby had just turned professional when I was leaving school. So I didn't turn pro until I was 23 years of age. So I went to university, did my studies, did all that, trained pretty much as a pro while I was in university, and then picked up my first contract and went from there. Nowadays, guys are going straight out of school and going into professional setups. We've 4 provinces here in Ireland. So we've got Connacht, Ulster, Leinster and Munster, and the 4 provinces, 4 regions. And, they get picked up at underage. Like there's sub-academies now where guys get brought in at 14, 15 years of age and they get spotted. And by the time they leave school, it's narrowed down just to the select few. And then it's even cut again to actually get a full-time professional contract. So like the numbers are tiny. It's just like any other, it's 0.001% of people that actually make it. But I always knew, even if I don't make it, or if guys don't make it, those life skills of trying to pursue that stand to you massively. And but we have a good system, because even guys that go in straight from school, it's pretty much it's a part of your contract that you have to either study or do an apprenticeship or do something along the lines that if you get an injury or you just don't make it, that you have something to go back, fall back on when you leave rugby. Now, other countries may not be quite as good, but there's rugby players' unions in pretty much all the big rugby nations now, and they're making sure that guys, it's educating guys as well as the unions. But I think rugby generally, globally, they do see that it's important that guys and girls, ladies rugby is becoming professional in some countries. But when players leave, that they're studying or pursuing something else, that when they retire for whatever reason, just old age or whatever, that they can fall back into something else. That's important, but it's good mentally as well. Like it's good to have a hobby or a pastime that you're interested, that you can get away from just, sport all the time, because, most people have a day job and then they play sport for fun. But when sport is your job, you need to go the other way. You need to have something to get away from it. So, we have a good system here in Ireland, good system in all the Six Nations countries as well. I think World Rugby, we need to help the smaller nations out a bit more, especially the Pacific Islands, Tonga, Samoa, Fiji, countries like that. Cook Islands produce an awful lot of good rugby players for all around the world, but they're not necessarily looked after as well as they probably should be. But, just the Pacific Islands Rugby Players Union now, who are doing great work. So all in all, I think rugby is a good place, because at the end of the day, for 99.9% of players that finish up, it's not like football where you're a millionaire, you can live for the rest of your life. A lot of sports are like that. Maybe American football, guys can retire quite handsomely, but in Ireland or in rugby generally, that's not the case. But again, if you're ambitious and successful in one career, you're not going to be happy with that once you retire. You want to be successful in your second career.
Indeed. So in terms of the income from rugby, it can't really be compared to football, with the average salary of a Premier League football player being £60,000 a week. To some extent, I can see some positives in this because rugby players know they might have to start a second career after finishing rugby and therefore learn skills in other areas. What do you think about that concept?
Well, look, if I was playing big money when I was playing, I'd have taken it. There's no doubt about that. But, it does have its advantages that you're always conscious of. You're always focused, look, I'm playing rugby now, it's all great, but it does focus you on, okay, this could finish up any day. Where am I? Regards, and, so you can't rest on your laurels. Now, I know there's a lot of footballers and golfers and girls that make big money, and they do great stuff with it. Like, not every sports person who makes billions and loses it all within a couple of years. Like, that does happen, but I think that's fairly rare. I think there's more education around all sports now that, we've all seen the stories of athletes, especially, I suppose, back in the 80s, 90s, and, they were, multi-billionaires, and then they're broke a couple of years later, so I think most people have learned from that, and most sports organizations have learned from that. You will get the odd person that will go that way, but definitely focuses your mind, your ego. I think it keeps you fairly grounded as well. So, well, with all sports people, but I think rugby has a real advantage there that for any employer, any retiring sports person, whether that be rugby or whatever, is a huge, huge asset. And no, they most likely will not have 10 years experience in your industry. Of course they haven't, because they've been playing sport. But all those soft skills, like the resilience, the communication skills, the decision-making, just performing under pressure, used to high performance environments, all that kind of stuff that you can't buy, stuff that people will write down on a CV, but you don't really know they have it until, they're a couple of months down the line. Literally, you're guaranteed that with a sportsman or a sports person coming out. So I think that's something that business should recognize a little bit more, because I even found that, look, it's 10 years since I retired, but, I couldn't get a job for love nor money. Oh, Peter, you don't have experience in well, just give me 6 weeks and I'll be up to speed. Don't worry about it. And I have all the other skills that you really, really need, but, I think that's beginning to change. But long and short of it, it does set you up for business. Sport does set you up nicely for business, and it certainly evolves you as a character. And as an employer, I would never be shy in pretty much straight away employing any sports person that come across. And if you don't have a role for them, especially in big organizations, find a role, get them in there, because they will create really good stuff for you.
Yeah, that's a really intriguing point. And as you say, a sports person's skill set might be different to your traditional university educated person who started working in a corporate environment immediately after graduating. But it can also add a completely different perspective. I think in recent years, we have seen a rise in companies offering opportunities to people who didn't study at universities and took a non-conventional path. But I obviously can't comment from the sports perspective. So a couple more rugby-related questions before we move on. What was your biggest success or proudest moment in your career? And on the opposite side, what was your biggest setback or disappointment?
Right, fair enough. Great questions. And they'll actually run straight into each other. So I'll start. So I suppose my biggest achievement was winning a European Rugby Championship Cup with Wasps. Wasps Rugby back in 2007. So that was just fantastic. We had a great team, great players, great coaches, great backroom staff, and it just all came together. Obviously it didn't happen by luck, but look, I worked hard to get into that team. But at the same time, it was great to be there and be part of all that. And, one of my sporting ambitions came true. And yeah, look, that was just immense. 3 weeks later, I suppose 6 weeks later, I had signed. Well, I'd signed during the season to go to Bristol, and that was a disaster. So I arrived first day at Bristol and Bristol Rugby. Now things have changed massively there. Now they're just doing amazing stuff. When I joined, I was expecting Bristol Rugby to be where they are now, but they weren't. So I'd certainly join them right now if I had it. But anyway, but lots of great people in Bristol Rugby. It's just, the coach that signed me got the sack before I arrived, and I was on the back foot straight away. And, I found it very difficult to get a game. So I'd just gone from being a European champion, the only European person with a European Cup medal on the Bristol squad, and then I couldn't get a game for best part of 2 years. So it just goes to show you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. You try and make the best decision possible, but things out of your control, like a coach change at the last minute, can throw things out. Now that can work well for you. That could have went the other way, but I found in my career, I was a prop forward. I played in the front row. I was a tight head prop, so number 3. And every coach that I've played for that has been a front row player that has played in my position when they were playing rated me. Always, I was always first choice. And it just happens that the other type of coach I've had in my career has always been a scrum half for some reason. So number 9, so a back. So pretty much the exact opposite type of player on the rugby team. And for some reason, none of them coaches have ever rated me. And I've struggled to get on teams that they've been coaches of. So I would tend to go that I think I was good enough because all the guys that used to play in my position picked me. The guys that didn't pick me. So, you don't know. So, I asked to leave there eventually, and I ended up in Harlequins for a couple of months. And I ended up playing in Wales with the Peter Bracken and down in Carcassonne in France, and they were fantastic life experiences as well. So you have your ups and downs. So. But it builds you as a character. Like everything was just going brilliantly. I reached the peak. I wanted to maybe get a few caps for Ireland and get into Ireland squad. And then I go to a club I'm not even playing. So your value just... Now, I didn't disapprove. I was hitting my peak as a front row player at that time. And I reckon I had 4 or 5 massive years ahead of me. So, when I retired, I kind of felt I'd underachieved a little bit. But... you refocus, eventually, and you say, look, I did well. I used my skill set as best I could and worked. I left everything out there, as in, I'm happy enough to say that, I did everything in my power to be the best rugby player I could be. And, and retired on that. So I'm happy enough doing that. Now, I've never officially retired. I've just haven't played professional rugby in best part of 9-10 years, but I've played the odd charity game and coaching and all that kind of stuff, and I still really, really enjoy the sport.
That's a really interesting story, and regardless of the setback that you had in your career, you still managed to achieve great things in the sport, including the European Cup, as you mentioned. So let's talk about that transition from professional sportsperson to life after. You do tend to hear a lot about those disaster stories of ex-professional athletes losing all their money shortly after retiring. But as you say, that's probably a small number in reality. Regardless, sports people retire much younger than in other professions, and you don't really have the choice to travel for the rest of your life. Was that something in the back of your mind, especially with a sport like rugby, where an injury can put a quick end to your career?
Yeah, no, it was always on my mind. So I kept my education going while I was playing rugby, and I did some work experience in a few different industries while I was playing. So, you know, maybe you might have a day off during the week, a rest day. You know, I'd either use that as a family day, which in itself used to be fantastic. Like, that was the great thing about rugby. You had the best of both worlds. You best of every world when you were playing well. Now, when you weren't playing well and you weren't getting picked, it's the worst job in the world. But if you are getting picked and you're playing well, it's the best in the world, because you have what very few people ever get to experience. You have time and money. Okay, so, you know, a lot of financially successful people have no time to spend on other things in life. Then other people, you know, have all the time in the world, but, you know, for whatever reason, they're broke or whatever, you know. So without, so you end up having both. But, you know, like, you know, there's a cliff coming. There's a cliff coming. So are you prepared for it? Now, all you can do is try and prepare your best. There's no guarantees once you retire that you're going to pick anything up. There could be a long transition. From me, I don't believe I'm fully transitioned, you know, 10 years out of the game, but I'm getting there. But for me, it's been really good. It's been very, very challenging, I suppose. So I retired. Again, you know, I would have been one of the majority of players that, you know, had a bit of savings at the end of it, but wasn't on the huge, phenomenal money. So, you know, you had a year really there of a little bit of leeway. I retired into a worldwide recession, and I investments and properties and different things, and I got absolutely wiped out. So pretty much went broke. But I was as happy as Larry because I was a full-time father. When I retired, we were lucky as a family. We're not lucky. She's an extremely professional and well thought of person in her field. But my wife got headhunted, so she got a job straight away. So we were secure in that way. But we decided as a family, like while I was playing rugby, just personally, like I really admire people and families that there's two parents working, going out and doing their best for the kids, which is extremely admirable. I was always quite conscious that, if possible, that we as a family would have one parent as a full-time carer, if at all possible. So while I was playing rugby, both my kids were born, and you know, so my wife's a full-time parent for 4, 5, 6 years, which was fantastic. So when I retired, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I had an engineering qualification, so I tried that for 6 months after retiring, and I thought in the first week, oh, do you know what? I'm a little bit spoiled here. I had the greatest career in the world now. Now I'm into the real world, and I don't really like this, but, you know, bar up, like, come on, Peter, you had the dream job. Now this is reality. You begin to like it. 6 months down the line, I just realized I had no passion for that type of stuff anymore, and it was beginning to get me down. So, and we were both kind of working and trying to make it, but then we said, you know what, as a family, I would go full-time parenting, and it was brilliant. Like, I would, if at all possible. Now you do have to make sacrifices. There's financial stuff that, you know, you might have to sacrifice, but just for me personally, it was worth everything 100 times over, that I could actually rear my own kids. And, you know, that's just, for me, invaluable. So I did that for a couple of years, and that was just really, really fantastic, because, you know, I was beginning to think, I felt a little bit that I could have done a little bit more in my rugby career, but, you know, and that's playing on your mind. But when you're a full-time parent, that goes out the window pretty quickly because you have stuff to get on with and get doing. So I did that. But then I said, look, the kids are getting on great. Everything's fine. What do I do next? Just for myself and for everything else, I'd like to have something in. I applied for jobs, sent 100 CVs away, got zero replies because of that whole thing about, you don't tick the box, Peter. We need someone with whatever, 10 years experience in our field. Well, I was never going to, and plus management and all that kind of skills are farther up the tree that where I would really excel at, leading people and stuff like that. Whereas at the time, things may have changed now, but I basically had no choice but to go self-employed, which I was fine with. And I set up, and so what can I do? Look, when you play rugby, there's only a certain amount of coaching jobs. There's only a certain amount of punditry jobs you can get afterwards. So, vast majority of guys have to go into the normal workforce. So I started... So I set up my Scrum Doctor business. So I saw a niche, I saw something that was absolutely needed. I did my market research, did the whole lot. Every club, any rugby person I talked to said, we really need what you have, Peter. We need expert world-class coaching in the front row and in the scrum, just specifically the scrum, because it's the one area of the game. It's the most technical area of the game. It's one of the more dangerous areas of the game, and also there's the least amount of knowledge and coaching ability in that area of the game. So every club wants it. I did it. I put everything into that for 3 years. There is a market, but I found the market is not in Ireland and the UK. And I wasn't, just with family and everything, willing to move abroad to do that. That's something now I might pursue again down the line. There's definitely huge potentials in emerging nations. What I found was that everyone wants the coaching, but no one wants to pay for it. So you're pretty much wasting your time. Now, in my market research, people were saying, yeah, of course we would pay for it, but when it actually comes to it, and it's either that clubs don't genuinely have the money to pay for it, or they're actually getting good coaching from the rugby unions in every other aspect of the game, apart from the scrum. So they're not used to paying for it. So they're used to getting stuff for free. So when you come along and ask for money, well then, the phone line goes kind of, quiet and whatever. So, but what a great experience about going self-employed, running a business, all that kind of stuff. So, that has stuck to me. So the long and the short of it, I went broke, all the rest, started to get back together, did the rugby. And so, but while I was building the Scrum business, I was still a full-time parent as well, which was fantastic. I've pretty much been a full-time parent since. There was a 6-month period there that 3 years ago, just to supplement my income, I ended up selling cars for a couple of months. And day one, I got into the electric car, a Nissan Leaf, for the first time. And oh my God, I couldn't believe how good it was. I couldn't believe the acceleration and just the performance. And I said, these are amazing. Everyone's going to want one of these. They're just so much better. Like within 10 seconds of driving an electric car, I said, oh, these are the future. These are just far superior than, petrol or diesel cars. These are going to be brilliant. That was 3 years ago. People are beginning to go, talk about electric cars. Back then, it was absolute, you're, some sort of, crazy person. That's crazy talk, Peter, with those newfangled electric cars. They'll never take off, But thankfully, we've gone past that. But it was brilliant. So, and that was a Nissan Leaf, lovely, lovely car. But a bog standard pretty much for an electric family car. It wasn't like a rock. It wasn't a high performance jobby, but the acceleration was just amazing. I said, if there's the performance here in that car, which is how good are the top end cars? So so I've driven a Tesla S and a Tesla X and all that, and oh my God, I actually hired a Tesla X from UFO Drive. They're the guys, an Irish guy started it. They're in Luxembourg, but they're basically the electric car rental. And they were so easy to rent. That was the number one thing. I just needed a car and I didn't want to wait for 2 hours to fill up paperwork. But the second thing, electric car, I just wanted to get into a Tesla X for a day just to experience it. Oh my God, I went 600 miles out of I did my day's work, and then I just went on a tour around Ireland just to experience the car and the acceleration. I wasn't driving dangerously, but if I had a chance to slow down just to accelerate, I kept doing, So again, and then, but pretty much when you start talking about electric cars, then you get hit immediately with all the objections and whatnot. So I decided, but that day, 3 years ago, in that car, I said, oh my God, something kind of hit me, one of those life-changing moments. I said, I was always sustainably conscious. Now, I wasn't an eco-warrior. I wasn't going living in a tree and all that kind of stuff. I like my technology. I like my luxuries, but I realized, I'd always have recycled. I grew up on a farm, so everything was reused. There was no waste. That was just in me. My grandparents, my parents were like that. So I said, you know what? There's all the technologies in the world to be extremely sustainable. You don't need to be burning stuff, to be moving stuff or heating stuff anymore. The technology is there. Let's get to it. So immediately I said, look, what can I do as one person, as a dad? What can I do to lower my carbon footprint? And I just went about doing it. And, there's about 20 things you can do. I said, look, I'll do one thing a week. I had about 5 of them done within the first couple of days because they were just easy. And I find if there's 20 things you can do, there's about 5 of them that are, for any particular person, are really easy. There's 5 that are going to be quite challenging. And then there's 10 in the middle that are, once you do them once or twice, happy days. So start with what's easy for you. So for me, changing to electric car, easy. Like for me personally, that's just no brainer. Totally change my electricity to 100% renewable, easy. For someone else now, changing a car to electric could be a big thing that they might be very easy for them to go vegan or to not go vegan, but lower their meat intake. I'm a meat eater. I love my chops and my steak or whatever. So that's been more of a challenge. But I went for the low-hanging fruit first, and I've even lessened my meat content. Now, I'm a big supporter, a big believer in sustainable and holistic farming and using basically the Alan Savory type management of that you can eat meat and you can have cows and you can have, if they're sustainably farmed and local and done properly. This big, huge monoculture industrial farming is destroying the planet. But if you farm properly, you can save the planet. I think if one type of person can save the planet, it's farmers, but we can all help with reducing our energy. So that was what inspired me. And I've continued to do that in my life. And the thing I try to talk to people just in my own network about is my life has improved. It certainly has, a worst case scenario, stayed the same. I have the same standard of living. And I reckon I have a higher standard of living actually. But your standard of living is not going to go down. And I think that's what people are afraid of. Oh, if I make all these changes, we'll be going back 100 years back into the dark ages. No, you won't. You'll be fine. It would be just give it a try. Give it a try.
Wow. So really a lot to digest there. And I'm glad you transitioned on to electric vehicles. You touched upon the reason you first found electric vehicles amazing. And that was the performance aspect, the acceleration, etc. I think with EVs, there are many different reasons for that initial excitement. For some, it can be the performance, as you just mentioned, and for others, it can be the sustainability aspect. It was also really interesting hearing you talk about the different changes you can make in your life to become sustainable. And you mentioned giving up meat, which would be harder for you, but changing to an EV would be easier. I think with EVs, it often really depends on the country you live in and the infrastructure available. I know that you've lived in Ireland, England, and France for a short time too. How would you describe the EV landscape in Ireland overall?
I think we're similar enough to the UK, but maybe a little bit behind. We tend to, like, even cars in Ireland, they tend to be launched. They come to the UK, a new model arrives in the UK. It's about 6 months later that it arrives in Ireland. So for the actual car, so, the new Nissan Aera, or however you pronounce that, right. So, sorry, better example, the new electric MG5, it arrived in the UK, I think, about 6 months ago or something. It's just arrived like in the last couple of weeks here in Ireland. So we're a little, but that's fine. It eventually comes. Infrastructure is getting better. Like, there's no reason right now why you can't drive EV. And Ireland is just perfect because it's a small country. These cars can do 250 miles on one charge. So you leave home, charge up. There's nowhere you can go from one place to the next in Ireland, really. That's very much more than 400 kilometers. So, Ireland is a great test case, and the countryside, everyone has plugs in their house. Like when I go to my mom's, I just run a lead from the kitchen and, go out there. But a lot of people don't realize that you can just plug from anywhere. So people do say, oh, there's not the infrastructure, or there's not the public charging, I get stuck. My answer is, well, first of all, you'll be charging from home for 98% of your journey, so you're going to be okay. Oh, well, if I need to go to Dublin and drop my mom at the airport, what will I do? I said, you'll get there, no problem. Not from Mayo. Sure, that's miles away. I said, yeah, from Mayo, from the other side of the country, you will get to Dublin. You get from Mayo to Dublin, no problem, one charge will be fine. Oh, really? Oh, okay, that's fine. And what will I do then? I said, well, sure, charge at Dublin airport, or, will you need a pee, or will you need to, have a coffee or whatever? Oh, I will on the way back. Yeah, stop, have a coffee, recharge, you're going to be fine. So, so the charging is there, but I ask people, how many chargers do you think you are? People don't see them until you start driving electric. You see these chargers everywhere, but if you're driving a petrol, I never really noticed them until I started driving electric. Now I see them everywhere, and you get to know them. And I'm not the most organized person in the world, but I'll have the car charged. I know where I'm going. I know where the stops are. There's the app on the phone. There's the app on the car. I can stop here, charge away. So it definitely needs to get better. It is getting better. Supermarkets and destination charging is becoming a good thing. I think there's a lot of businesses at the moment that I believe are installing chargers in their company car parks, that when COVID goes, that, people will be able to charge, at work and whatnot. The councils are a little bit hesitant about charging, and there's a lot of paperwork to go through, but all those issues are being overcome. And, I think the more people see these chargers, like 2 years ago, when I stopped to charge, at least one person would come over and say, oh, you're charging, I've never seen that before, whatever, and have a good chat. No one comes over anymore because it's standard. Like, people see these cars being charged, and we're getting close to the pivot point here in Ireland. So long and the short of it, I'd say we might be charging infrastructure maybe a year or so behind the UK. I haven't driven over in France, electric yet, or in Europe where I lived. So, but I would always say, how many chargers do you think there are in the world or whatever? And they say, oh, maybe 1 million chargers or whatever. I don't know. I don't even know what. But I'd say, no, there's probably about 100 billion or like at least 10 billion. I said, what? What are you talking about? I said, in this room now, and you'd be talking in this kitchen. I say, there's at least 6. I can see 6 charge points here. I said, where? Oh, you can charge from here and you can charge from, yeah, it just takes longer. Absolutely, it'll take longer, but, it'll get you to the next charger. You charge overnight. So, even if you're out in the sticks, once you have electricity, you can charge a car. And, but the home charging is going to be the greatest thing ever because, people are used to charging mobile phones overnight, ready to go in the morning. But it's just that whole mindset of getting over that barrier that, okay, lithium-ion batteries, they're different in cars than they are in phones, but it's the same principle. Most people, you charge overnight, you're ready to go in the morning. And you can charge and you can save money and you can have smart meters and all this kind of stuff that you can charge when it's the cheapest, when renewable energy is at its highest and all the rest. And I'm sure you get this all the time, Ryan, but I just feel the education, like anything, is the most important thing. Once you can have a conversation with someone about it and they're open-minded enough to listen, it sows a seed in their head that this is definitely doable. And okay, if you can walk somewhere, walk. If you can cycle. Absolutely. That's the way I do. I say, can I walk there? No. Can I cycle? Yeah. Okay. Can I use public transport? Is the public transport electric? Even better. Okay. I'm out in the countryside here in Ireland. There's no electric buses. Okay. I need to get to a car. So the last case scenario, okay, I need to use a car. When I'm going to go electric, I'm not going to go petrol or diesel. So, if you can get someone from a diesel, it's going to be difficult in Ireland anyway, because the public infrastructure is only average. To get someone from a diesel car into a bus, it's easier to get them into an electric car. And then it might be easier to get them into a bus. Then it might be easier to get them cycling or walking or whatever. So it's definitely progress.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I also agree that education is the number one priority in the mass adoption of EVs. So in terms of your EV interest and potentially creating business opportunities out of it, do you think you'll be able to harness your network from your rugby career and the people you've met throughout your career so far?
Oh, definitely. Like rugby is a huge network and a very positive one. It's and I suppose one piece of advice, it came to me naturally anyway. Like I'd be quite sociable and I'd be out. I didn't even know I was doing it, but technically I would have been networking. I was with fans and people around rugby clubs. I was just chatting and having the fun and the crack and a bit of banter and whatever. But it all helps. It can be a little bit more difficult for other people. But I think while you're playing, and it's very important. One piece of advice I would have for players at the moment is just to network and talk to the fans and talk and do it anyway, because that's part of your job. But and like you don't have to have an ulterior motive or anything like that. But you just like there's people that I've engaged with while I was playing. We're still friends. We built up friendships, fans and all that, and down through the years, and I can, and people are in different industries, and yeah, it's a huge network, and people now know I begin to realize I'm in the whole sustainability, electric mobility sphere, and that'll hopefully lead to, and it is leading to conversations and opportunities and different partnerships. And I have a big project that I can't kind of name at the moment that I'm gearing up for, and hopefully 2022, when this COVID is over, we'll be ready to launch and ready to do it. And it's just all about how global sport is tackling climate change and bring in the whole rugby analogy in there, and it's winning. Global sport, the global sporting emissions in the world is similar to the country of Spain. So it has, between professional and amateur sport, it has a high carbon footprint, and it hasn't been an area that has been really looked at in any great depth. And there are solutions out there for all sporting clubs and organizations to use to go reduce their carbon footprint, which will obviously be great for the environment, but it'll be great for their bank balance as well. Like, clubs are struggling, especially in COVID, like, clubs are really at the pin of their collar, and they'll want to be saving money first of all so that they survive. So there's many, many solutions that they can look into to lower their costs and be more environmentally friendly. So that's and I want to use my sporting profile to highlight all these solutions. So that's a project I have down the line, and I have partnership opportunities available. Right now I can't officially launch because I want to get all my ducks in a row so we're ready to go. But happy to talk, and it will make headline news. Like, there'll be a lot of publicity around it, a lot of positive publicity around it. We'll be getting my sporting contacts and high profile, sports people involved in it. So yeah, looking forward to it. But it is, like, sport is a great network. But even, like, starting off up a business, and running a business, it turned out to be more of a hobby business now. But the whole Scrum Doctor, that was a real learning curve. So I suppose because I was a professional athlete, it breaks the ice straight away, like, just in a business sense, that so that's validation. Okay, this guy's was a professional athlete, so he's serious about what he does, and he's resilient, and he'll get the job done, okay? But people, I feel, now maybe it's a subconscious thing with me, maybe it's just me, but I do find that, okay, he was good at rugby and whatever, is he any good at business? Is he just a beefcake that played a bit of rugby and wants to get on a jolly now for the rest of his life? Has he substance behind that, like, in a business sense or in a commercial sense? And, that's what I have to prove. And I do believe, as soon as people get to talk to me, they say that's, so I think I've both going for me there. I have the whole connections and the sports side of things, but I also know how things work in business and get things done. So, yeah, but definitely it's like anything else. Like, I'm building, in the last 3 years, I've always had rugby connections, and that has been really helpful. But I've evolved a whole new network of people within electric mobility and sustainability and great people. And I find it such a positive area because it's so new and it's so good. If I was to go into the oil industry now, I think I would lose the will to live, because you're just doing bad. You're doing bad. Like, I'm very simple with a lot of things. Is something good or bad? Is a person good or bad? But with renewable energy, electric energy, sustainability, it's all good, and it attracts positive, good people that genuinely want to make a difference. So I get a great kick out of it. And I did one thing about when I retired from rugby. I was a little bit concerned just for mental health. Now, I worked through it, and because I was aware of it, I did something about it. But I was afraid that, will I ever find anything else that I'm as passionate about? Will I, be able to dedicate my time and effort and my life to something important? I have my family, that's number one. So yes, that's there. But is there a professional thing that I could do? I tried a few different things, didn't have the passion for it, but knew when to leave that and go. And when that day I got into that Nissan Leaf, I said, this is it. It just clicked in me. It was the same buzz I got from playing rugby. I can make a difference. And And it started with electric cars, but then it's gone into the whole mobility, but then it's gone into sustainability, energy. It all intertwines. And I just find people, in this industry, in the wider industry, renewable energy and sustainability and electric mobility, open-minded, forward-thinking people. And I've developed a passion for it and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, and I find that really inspirational that you've managed to discover this passion for EVs. And, that's one of the reasons I'm doing the podcast today, because I've also grown a passion for the industry. And I love speaking to like-minded individuals like yourself who want to make the world a better place through sustainable transportation. I'd also love to have you back on the podcast when you have more information on your project. So let's dive into some quickfire questions now. Firstly, what is your favorite electric vehicle at the moment?
Nissan Leaf. But I can't wait for the Cybertruck to come along.
Great answer, and two very different sides of the EV world as well. What are you most looking forward to in 2021?
Getting to fully charged live event in, I want to drive over to UK and want to drive to that in my electric car, and just to meet people that I can only meet online or whatever.
Okay, great. And I'm also looking to attend myself, hopefully. Next question. What do you think the biggest misconception about electric vehicles is?
Cost of ownership. People think they're way more expensive because the list price is that bit more expensive. But rule of thumb with me is within a year, 18 months, you've saved that difference. And then from then on, you're actually saving money. So it's actually cheaper. It's cheaper to own an electric vehicle day in, day out. But in 3 years time, it will be the same price. So, there'll be absolutely no excuse. So if an electric vehicle is 6-7 grand more to buy, people think, they're way more expensive or whatever. But, you'll make that up within a year, 18 months. So I don't think that's, but people don't realize that. When they sit down and do the results, do the sums, it becomes quite obvious.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you on that. Okay, so a bit more of a personal question related to your journey so far. What advice would you give to a former sports person hoping to transition into a new career completely different to sports?
Network, and do a bit more networking while you're playing, and do it genuinely. Don't have an issue or don't have just talk to people, and you never know who's going to be. I had another thing, had a quick one. Network and it might come to me, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And especially with tools like LinkedIn, it's never been an easier time to network with new people. So what other things do you do that you would consider sustainable on a daily basis, aside from driving an EV?
Well, I do something absolutely ridiculously mad, and I don't expect anyone else to do this, but I haven't turned on heating in 3 or 4 years.
Wow, I wish I could say the same thing, but that's pretty incredible, but also not that surprising given you're a former professional rugby player. I would say to people, though, that before you decide to turn up the temperature in your house, do consider wearing a jumper or warmer clothes, as that's a much more cost-effective and sustainable way of keeping yourself warm inside. Is there one thing or one person that inspired you to have a passion for e-mobility?
Yeah, probably Robert Llewellyn, to be honest.
Well, you've given me a great opportunity to plug my episode with him too. One thing I'd say is he and Fully Charged have made the industry a little bit more digestible and entertaining to people like you and I, who might not be familiar with the science and technical jargon behind electric vehicles.
That's absolutely, yeah. No, I can see, like, with me, I'm not a detail. I don't know that I'm not an absolute expert in electric vehicles, the inner workings of, but I know what's fun to drive, and I know what looks good, and I know, a bit. So I suppose I can relate to him. He's very relatable, I think, and the whole Fully Charged crew. I think Roger Atkins, Roger does amazing work as well. There's a lot of really great ambassadors out there, and Roger's been doing it from day one. And I'm only new to the game, and like the amount of effort and work he's put in, in 10, 12 years to highlight it when, people would have thought he was crazy 12 years ago, So good on him. And everyone else, of all those original people that persisted in the early days when it was absolutely not mainstream, when you were most likely considered a bit of an aloof or something, So
yeah, and I don't see why you can't become the next Robert Llewellyn or Roger Atkins. You come from a very unique angle that you don't see every day, and I hope you can be successful at it as well. So we finish every episode by asking our guest if there's anything they'd like to plug that they are working on at the moment.
Yeah, but basically that's it, Ryan. I am using sport and my sporting profile to to transition people to a more sustainable life, and that's what I can bring to the party and do for humanity. Because as a father, I want to leave the planet in a better, cleaner state for my kids and their kids and grandkids and all the rest. So, and we need to get it done pretty quickly. The time is now. We don't. We knew about it back in the 70s. We've done nothing about it until now, and we really need to get cracking on this. And if I can highlight stuff, get my face out there, not because of my own personal ego, but it's just to, I can maybe, I believe an awful lot of people can relate to me and can relate to sport and can relate the transition. And, I will be asking for help. So if you'd like to see what it's all about, please contact me and how we can collaborate with companies and any, I'm very interested to reach out to companies within the renewable energy, e-mobility, sustainability, construction, sustainable construction, industries. If you're genuinely proactively going green, not greenwashing, because I know straight away, if you're genuinely doing good stuff that way, I'm here to promote that in the best way I can. And, and we can do that.
Perfect. Thank you for joining the podcast, Peter.
Thank you, Ryan. Great chatting. Really enjoyed it.
It was a unique opportunity to welcome Peter to the podcast to discuss his transition from professional rugby player to e-mobility advocate, the state of EV charging in Ireland, and his upcoming project in 2022. We'll be back for another episode soon. Revolution Conference 2021 is just 170 days away. Register today at revolutionconference.com.